Story 1. I've never put much stock in the supernatural, ghosts, spirits, alternate realities. I always figured it was just overactive minds and too many horror flicks. But lately, something's been happening that's unraveling every assumption I've held about the world. It began 3 weeks ago, and I still can't rationalize it. I just bought a car. Nothing extravagant, just a reliable 4-door with decent mileage. It came with a built-in GPS, which I was genuinely excited about. No more fumbling with my phone or getting turned around en route to unfamiliar places. For the first couple of weeks, everything was smooth. The GPS was spot on, taking me to work, friends' homes, new food spots, wherever I needed to be. But then one Friday night, things turned strange. I was headed across town to meet some colleagues for drinks. I keyed in the address and started driving. Midway through, the GPS recalculated my route. I assumed it was avoiding traffic or a wreck, so I followed the new directions without a second thought. About 10 minutes later, I noticed we were in an area I didn't recognize. The buildings looked older, neglected. The streets narrowed, and there were barely any cars. A creeping unease set in, but I figured maybe it was a shortcut I'd never taken. Eventually, the GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." But there was no bar, no bustling nightlife. I was on a hushed residential street lined with Victorian-era homes, many of them boarded up or overtaken by weeds. I double-checked the address. It was right. I re-entered it. Still, the GPS confirmed I was there. I called one of my coworkers for help. As I described where I was, she sounded baffled. "There's no neighborhood like that anywhere near the bar," she said. "Are you sure you're even in the city?" I ended up using my phone's map app to get back to familiar streets and arrived at the bar over an hour late, shaken and confused. I wrote it off as a weird GPS malfunction, until it happened again the next day. I was headed to the grocery store, a route I knew by heart. Midway there, the GPS again tried to steer me back to that same eerie street. This time, I didn't listen. I ignored it and took my usual path. But the GPS kept urging me to turn around. Over the next few days, no matter where I went, the GPS tried to reroute me to that same dead-end street. I took the car to the dealership. They ran diagnostics, took it for a test drive. Everything checked out. No issues. They said the GPS worked perfectly. I began to feel like I was unraveling. Was I miskeying addresses? Imagining things? After a week of this, I gave in. I decided I needed to face the place again. I needed to prove it was real. So, on a Saturday afternoon, I let the GPS guide me without resistance. The closer I got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The sky dimmed, though it was only 2 p.m. The air felt thick, almost claustrophobic. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles blanched. The street looked just as before. Decayed homes, silence, a sense of abandonment. Then I saw it. A house that didn't match the rest. It looked pristine, fresh paint, manicured lawn, warm golden light in the windows. But what chilled me to the core was that it was identical to my house. Same paint, same shutters, same car in the driveway. Like someone had copied and pasted my life onto this forsaken block. I sat there, stunned, staring. Then, behind one curtain, a silhouette moved. Just a vague figure, but there was something disturbingly familiar about it. My phone rang, jolting me. It was my mother. I tried to sound normal during our conversation, but I couldn't tear my eyes from that house. Eventually, she asked what was wrong. I told her everything, the GPS weirdness, the street, the house that matched mine. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "Oh, child, it found you." A chill crept down my spine. "What do you mean? What found me?" She sighed. "I never wanted to tell you. I hoped it'd skip your generation. But it happened to me too. And to my mother before me." I was speechless. She went on. "The women in our family, when we reach a certain age, that place begins to call us. The street that doesn't exist. The house that mirrors our own." "But why?" I asked. "What does it mean?" "I don't know," she said. "Some think it's a glimpse into another version of our lives. Others say it's a test. But it fades. Eventually it stops. Before GPS, we'd just end up there. Then we wouldn't." "Did you ever see anyone in the house?" I asked, thinking of the silhouette. Another pause. "Yes," she said. "It was me. An older version of me, watching from the window." She looked sad, like she wanted to warn me. I looked back at the house, half expecting to see myself watching from behind the curtain. But the window was still. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You go home. To your real home. You live your life. Don't chase it. Don't try to understand it. Let it pass. One day, you'll have this same talk with your daughter. I wanted to argue, to demand more, but I could tell that was all she could say. So I said goodbye, started the car, and drove home, my thoughts a storm of questions. That was weeks ago. The GPS still tries to reroute me there sometimes, though not as often. I've stopped using it. My phone's maps work just fine. I haven't returned to that street, but every day I think about it. About the house. About the figure in the window. I try to live like everything's normal, go to work, meet friends, run errands. But in the back of my mind, that street lingers. That quiet, forgotten place with the house that shouldn't exist. And the version of me that might still be there. Story 2. I'd been in Kyoto for a few days, aimlessly exploring the city. The kind of wandering where you let your instincts guide you instead of a tourist map. Kyoto is filled with tucked-away treasures, and I was in the mood to find one by accident. No schedule, no agenda. Just the sound of my footsteps and the hum of the streets. It was a cool afternoon, cloud-filtered light, the kind that makes everything look a little softer. I'd been walking for a couple of hours, weaving through back streets and quiet corners, when something caught my eye. Tucked between two aging buildings was a small shrine, almost hidden. It wasn't grand or flashy, but there was something about its presence that stopped me cold. 2 stone lanterns stood solemnly at the entrance, and a weathered torii gate framed the path. It didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like a secret I wasn't meant to stumble across. I stood there for a moment, just observing. The city noise seemed to fade, drowned by the stillness that surrounded the shrine. There were no signs pointing to it, and it wasn't on any map I had. It didn't look abandoned exactly, but it wasn't well kept either. More like it had been untouched for years, not out of neglect, but as if it existed outside of time. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, drawn to the shrine's stark elegance. Something about it felt ancient, like it belonged to some older version of the city. As I turned to take one last photo from a different angle, it happened. I turned back, and the shrine was gone. The space where it had stood was just empty. No lanterns, no gate, no steps, just a blank patch of walkway, as if the shrine had never been there at all. I froze, my heart thudding. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. Nothing. The alley was still there, now just an ordinary cut between buildings. I stepped forward, searching for any trace, stone, wood, even disturbed earth, but there was nothing. The unnerving part was that everything else around me remained exactly the same. A few flower pots, a shop sign a little farther down, but the shrine, erased. I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. But there wasn't a single person in sight, just me, standing in the middle of a silent street, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled through the photos I'd taken. The images were there, but they felt wrong, blurred in a way I couldn't explain, like the shrine didn't want to be captured. The photos weren't distorted exactly, but there was a haze to them, as if the shrine had been fading even as I snapped the pictures. I walked back and forth, retracing my steps, trying to find the exact spot. I circled the block twice. Still nothing. The shrine had vanished without a trace. Eventually, I gave up and headed to the nearest tourist information center. I showed them the photos and asked if they recognized the shrine. They didn't. In fact, the staff seemed puzzled that I had found a shrine between those 2 buildings at all. According to them, there wasn't anything remotely like that in the area. I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. Not really. I just felt this low thrum of discomfort, like I'd brushed up against something I wasn't meant to see. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn or gotten disoriented. But the more I thought about it, the more that explanation didn't sit right. I'd seen that shrine. I'd stood in front of it. I'd felt the air shift around it. A few days later, I walked through the same neighborhood again, searching for any sign of it. I checked every alley and side street. Nothing. Just the same quiet blocks and little shops. As if the shrine had never been there. Even now, I still think about it. I've searched online, asked locals, even looked through old city archives. No mention. No photos. No history. It's like that shrine slipped through some crack in the world, and for a brief moment, I happened to be standing in the right place to see it. And then it was gone. Story 3. I've always loved hiking. The kind of hike that lets you unplug completely. Just you, the trees, and the rhythm of your own breathing. It's how I reset. No distractions, no noise. So when a free weekend showed up out of nowhere, I grabbed my boots, packed light, and headed out to the woods. I drove about an hour from the city, hoping to find a trail I hadn't tried before. I had a map with me, though I wasn't planning to rely on it much. I just wanted to follow the trail, clear my mind, maybe take a few photos for the scrapbook. That was the idea. It started out perfectly. The trail was lined with towering oaks and pines. The air was crisp, and the sun filtered through the canopy in golden shards. The path was well marked, and I even passed a couple of other hikers who gave me friendly nods. All normal. But the deeper I went, the more strange it began to feel. At first, it was subtle. The trees seemed to lean in a little closer. The shadows felt heavier. The air had a thick, muffled quality, like I was walking into a sealed room. I chalked it up to fatigue. I'd already been walking for hours. And then I came to a fork. No signposts, just a split in the trail. I took the left path, figuring I could loop back eventually. But almost immediately something shifted. It was like crossing an invisible line. The forest grew unnervingly silent. No bird calls. No insects. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. I kept walking, trying to ignore the prickling sensation crawling up my spine. It was just trees. Just trail. I'd done this 100 times. But when I checked my watch, something didn't add up. I'd been hiking for over 5 hours. The sun should have been dipping by now, but it wasn't. It was still high above the trees, casting the same light it had hours ago. My gut clenched. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I'd lost track of time. Maybe my watch was acting up. I turned around, deciding to head back the way I came. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't find the fork again. The trail wrapped around in strange, looping curves. Everything looked the same, every tree, every mossy rock. I could have sworn I passed the same log 3 different times. I pulled out my phone. No signal. No GPS. Just a spinning loading circle on the map app. I checked my compass, something I always carry. The needle wasn't steady. It spun slowly at first, then faster, like it was confused. I was officially lost. I tried to stay calm and sat on a rock, catching my breath. My legs ached and my head throbbed. But sitting still felt worse than moving, so I got up and kept walking. That's when I noticed the silence again. No rustling, no chirps. Not even the hum of bugs. Just absolute stillness. And then that feeling, like I was being watched. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't just paranoia. It felt real, like something was just out of sight, waiting, listening. I started walking faster, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. But the path never changed. The woods never thinned. The sun never moved. And then, as if dropped from nowhere, there was a clearing. A small patch of grass, perfectly circular. The first open space I'd seen in hours. I ran into it like a drowning person reaching air. I collapsed onto the grass, trying to steady my breath. But even there, something was wrong. I looked around. This wasn't the same clearing I'd seen earlier in the day. In fact, I didn't recognize it at all. And when I checked my watch again, another hour had passed. But the sun was still fixed in the sky. Unmoving. Eternal. I realized then, I wasn't just lost. I was trapped. Caught in some kind of loop. A place where time didn't behave like it should. A forest that stretched on forever. I kept walking. I don't know how long. Hours, maybe more. Eventually, I gave up on finding an exit and sat down against a tree, hoping that resting would reset something. I must have dozed off. When I woke, the light had finally begun to fade. Whether it was sunrise or sunset, I had no idea. But I took that shift as my chance. I kept going until, almost miraculously, I stumbled onto a trail I recognized. I followed it without hesitation, and a few hours later, I saw the outline of my car through the trees. I nearly cried. By the time I reached the parking lot, it was completely dark. My phone finally buzzed to life, and that's when I saw the messages. I'd been missing for 3 days. 3 days. Not 6 hours. Not one long hike. Days. Texts from family. Missed calls. A message from a friend saying they were about to report me missing. I stared at the screen, numb. To this day, I can't explain what happened. Was it exhaustion? A time loop? Some strange pocket of space that twists around you when you're not looking? I don't know. Story 4. I've been sitting on this for 2 months, mostly because I still can't fully process it. But I need to tell someone. My roommate just rolls her eyes every time I bring it up, so here I am. I work the night shift at a McDonald's right off I-95 in Savannah, Georgia. One of those 24-hour locations that cater to the usual 3 a.m. crowd, drunk college kids, long-haul truckers, insomniacs. I'm usually on drive-thru. Management says I have the voice for it, whatever that means. This happened on a Friday night, or technically early Saturday morning, at about 2:45 a.m. We were surprisingly busy. 5 cars in the drive-thru, maybe 8 people eating inside. Mostly students from the university down the road. My co-workers that night were Malik and Junie on the grill, Tasha on the front counter, and our shift lead, Devin, doing manager stuff in the office. I was taking an order from a guy who wanted 40 nuggets and had very specific sauce demands when my headset suddenly cut out. Not like the battery died, just dead silence. No static, no ambient noise, nothing. I turned around to ask Devin for a replacement battery, and that's when I realized everyone was gone. Everyone. The college kids in the dining area. Vanished. Their food was still there, half-empty cups, fries scattered across trays. Steam still rising from their drinks. But the people? Gone. Malik, Junie, Tasha, Devin. Nowhere. I checked the kitchen. Empty. The office? Empty. Even the cars in the drive-thru had disappeared. And not just the ones in line. Every vehicle in the parking lot was gone too. But everything else? Exactly as it should have been. The fryers were still bubbling. The ice cream machine, yes, ours actually worked sometimes, was humming. The lights were on. It was like someone had hit a button and deleted all the people, leaving the scene behind untouched. I panicked. Not proud of it, but I did. I rushed to the front doors, but they were locked. We don't lock them during business hours, ever. Still, they wouldn't budge. I pulled out my phone, no signal. I picked up the store phone, and instead of a dial tone, it emitted this strange sound. Like an emergency broadcast tone, but warped. Like it was being played underwater, backwards. And then came the voices. Not from one direction. From everywhere. At once. It was like a chorus of overlapping AI-generated voices. Some sounded like drive-through speakers, but the words were garbled and fragmented. Can I get a side of reality static? Order tomorrow large paradox with please. Sauce for your echo? It was nonsense, and yet it felt deliberate. Purposeful. The digital menu board started glitching, flashing random combinations of menu items that don't exist. The prices kept changing, cycling through strange symbols and characters that weren't even numbers. The security cameras in the corners, fixed mounts, turned to face me. They're not supposed to move. They physically can't move. I ended up locking myself in the walk-in freezer. It was the only place that felt normal. The voices were still audible, but muffled by the thick door. I sat on the cold floor, knees pulled to my chest, watching my breath cloud the air. It felt like I was in there forever, but it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. And then just like that, it was over. Suddenly, I could hear the kitchen noises again. The beep of the fryers, the chatter of customers, the drive-through alert. It all came rushing back. I burst out of the freezer, probably pale and wide-eyed. Everything was back to normal. The college kids were eating like nothing had happened. The drive-thru was moving again. Malik and Junie were grilling. Tasha was at the counter. Devin looked up from the office and raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" he asked. "Why are you shivering?" According to him, I had been gone for maybe 30 seconds. They all thought I'd stepped into the restroom. The next day, I checked the security footage. I told Devin I thought someone may have tampered with the equipment just to get access. The video showed me standing at the drive-thru screen, then walking quickly to the freezer, and then coming back out seconds later. That's it. No missing footage. No glitches. But one thing stood out. The cameras. In the footage, you can clearly see them following my movement. They're not supposed to move. They can't. I still work there. Same hours. Same station. And sometimes, when the restaurant gets quiet in the early hours, I swear I still hear those voices in the static of the drive-thru. And once in a while, just for a blink, I see those strange, impossible menu items flash on the screen before returning to normal. The strangest part, ever since that night, the ice cream machine hasn't broken once. If you've ever worked in fast food, you know what kind of miracle that is. Anyway, that's the story. I just needed someone to hear it. And if you're wondering, no, none of my co-workers remember anything strange from that night. And yes, I asked for the security footage. But apparently, there was a system update the next morning. The files were accidentally deleted. Sure, Devin. Sure. Story 5. This happened last year, but it still messes with my head. I was in the hospital after a routine surgery, nothing crazy, just getting my gallbladder removed. Everything was supposed to be smooth. I woke up in recovery feeling okay, but about an hour later, I suddenly felt really cold, dizzy, and like my heart was beating out of my chest. I told the nurse something felt wrong, and that's the last thing I remember from inside my body. What I remember next was watching the whole thing happen, like I was standing in the corner of the room. I could see myself lying on the bed, pale as hell, a bunch of nurses rushing in, alarms going off. One of them was doing chest compressions. Another was calling for a crash cart. I remember thinking, holy shit, I'm dying. But I didn't feel panic. I felt weirdly calm, detached, like it wasn't really me down there, just a shell. I could hear them shouting numbers, shouting my name, and even yelling something like, "We're losing him." But I just watched. I even looked down at my arms and realized I didn't have arms, not physical ones. I was just this floating awareness, kind of like being in a dream, except more vivid than anything I've ever experienced. And then it got even weirder. I felt this pull, not like someone was grabbing me, but more like gravity started working in a different direction. Like I was about to be sucked upward, somewhere. I don't know where. And right before it happened, I heard this voice in my head, totally calm, just say, "Not yet." Next thing I knew, I jolted awake with a mask on my face, gasping like I'd been underwater. My chest hurt like hell from the compressions. Turns out I flatlined for almost 2 minutes. Heart completely stopped. But somehow I came back. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, not at first. But I'll say this, I was more alive during those 2 minutes than I've ever felt in my whole life. And whatever I was, wherever I was floating, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't a dream. I know what I saw. Story 6. Years and years ago, when I was young, I used to play video games like any young kid did. It was just my thing. I played every day. I had an Xbox 360. I didn't want anyone to know what my real name was or anything. It guy was weird, but I made an email for my Xbox Live account. The name on the email I created was under the name of Tom Liza. Not really sure why I named the account that, but T was the first name that came to my head, so I was like, what the heck, I'll just use that. So for years I had this account created with a fake name, Tom Liza. I stopped playing video games and 5 or 6 years go by, and I haven't touched the console or video games in general. I'm out one night with my best friend Will. We've just came back from playing dodgeball at this place, went to on a Friday night for some fun. I was 17 then, and just got my licenses. Like any new driver, most of the time, you don't know where you're going, lol. I was stopped at red light on Route 347, road I was on, headed home. I whipped out my GPS on my phone, and IT told me that I needed to get into the turning lane. Stupid me, without looking, turns into the turning lane and side-swiped this 2004 Toyota Corolla. At this point my heart is pounding through my chest because I'm 17, and I've never been in a car accident, nonetheless driving in general for that long. This guy gets out of the car pissed. Long story short, the police arrive, file a police report, and the night goes on from there. I get home, tell my mom that I got in a car accident and all that jazz, and she flips out on me. A few days go by, and I receive a copy of the accident report. I open the letter and begin to read the report, and I stop. I took a second and third look at the police report. The name of the person I got into an accident with was Tom Liza. Story 7. Let me just say this up front. I know how it sounds. I've wrestled with whether to share this at all. But I swear on everything, this happened, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. A few years ago, I went to Mississippi for a quiet weekend with family. Nothing dramatic, just a chance to unplug and breathe. But something about that place always made me feel off. Like the air was heavier. Like something unseen was always watching from just out of sight. I kept telling myself it was just the rural stillness messing with my city-trained nerves. I was staying with my cousin Rosalie on her property near Vicksburg. A charming old southern home with creaky hardwoods and a porch swing that groaned with every breeze. Past the house was nothing but low hills and woods. It was the kind of place where time moves slow and everyone knows your name and your business. One afternoon, after a long lunch, I decided to stretch my legs. The weather was warm but not unbearable, with just enough breeze to keep it pleasant. I followed the dirt road that winds along the edge of Rosalie's land. One I'd walked before, nothing unusual. Just trees, fences, and the occasional grasshopper flinging itself across my path. But this time, something felt different. At first, I thought I was just letting my imagination run wild. But the deeper I walked, the more I felt unsettled. The shadows were cast differently. The trees were shaped wrong, not dramatically, but just enough to make me second-guess myself. And then I noticed the road ahead had changed. It wasn't like the ground split open or the sky turned green. It was subtle, quiet, The curve of the road was unfamiliar. The trees on the left grew thicker and closer together. On the right, trees that hadn't been there minutes ago suddenly were. I stopped. My pulse picked up. I turned around, half expecting to find a different house behind me. But Rosalie's place was still there, exactly where it had been. So, I figured maybe I'd just never paid enough attention. I kept walking, and that's when I saw him. About 50 feet ahead, standing dead center in the path, was a man. He wasn't moving, just standing, frozen. I squinted. Maybe it was someone from the area I didn't recognize. But no, his clothes looked outdated, like something out of the late 90s. Worn jeans, a faded windbreaker, scuffed sneakers. Not retro, just old. But what really got me was his face. I couldn't see it. Not because it was in shadow or turned away, but because no matter how hard I tried to focus, the details blurred. It was like trying to remember a dream you just woke up from. The more I stared, the less I could make sense of it. And the strangest part, everything around him shimmered. Like heat waves on asphalt. Like static in the air. Like he wasn't really there, or wasn't supposed to be. I turned around. Rosalie's house was gone. The entire landscape behind me had changed. Where her house should have been was just an empty field. No porch. No swing. No fence. Nothing. I looked forward again. The man hadn't moved. Still watching. Still unreadable. That's when the fear hit me like a punch to the chest. I ran. I didn't look at the trees. Didn't look at the sky. I just stared at my feet and ran. I don't know how long I ran. Time felt wrong. Like I was moving through something thick and slow. But eventually, somehow, I found myself back at the house. I don't remember turning or seeing landmarks. I just remember the feeling of relief like a wave crashing over me. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, and collapsed on the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I kept looking out the windows, expecting him to be there at the edge of the woods. The next day, I tried to talk to Rosalie about it. I asked if she remembered the road beyond her property ever changing, if she'd seen anyone strange out there. She looked at me like I was speaking another language. "No, Han," she said. "That road's been the same for decades." When I pressed, she just shrugged and said maybe I was dehydrated or stressed. But here's the thing, I know what I saw. And it wasn't heat stroke. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a dream. It was something else. And the most unsettling part? I don't think that version of the road, or that figure, was meant to be seen. Not by me. Maybe I slipped into another thread of reality. Maybe there are versions of this world that leak into each other sometimes, just enough for you to catch a glimpse. Whatever it was, I haven't walked that road since, and I never will.